Many in fandom consider the second season of Star Trek the Original Series to be its best. But what fandom can never agree on is which episode in that season deserves the #1 spot. And so today, we'll take a look at one of the contenders for that coveted rank, the Ultimate Computer. Hello and welcome to Backtrek, a web series that focuses on the background information of any given topic in Star Trek. In this episode, we're taking a look at the Star Trek the Original Series episode The Ultimate Computer, to better understand its place in Star Trek history. With my Backtrek reviews taking off, I've begun to get many requests for deep dive, behind-the-scenes information on many episodes of the franchise, and recently a fan of the channel requested I do a video on The Ultimate Computer. Normally, it takes me quite a while to get around to doing requests. This isn't because I don't want to do them or I don't appreciate the requests, but there's a few factors that do lead to a slower response time on them. One is that I'm always about a month ahead of the videos you actually see, so even if I decide to make a specific request, you most likely won't see it for at least a month. The second reason is a more personal one. Put simply, I have to be inspired to make said video. I don't just sit down and pull an episode out of the hat and get to work. I find that doing things that way leads to videos that are subpar at best. And so, if I'm not inspired by a certain request, then I don't make that video until I am inspired. Well, luckily for David, the stars aligned on this one, as I had already begun to research the material for this video, and I was very much inspired. So I also juggled around my release schedule to put this video out before the others I had already made. The story for this episode was written by Lawrence N. Wolfe, who himself was actually a mathematician. Wolfe was fascinated by computers and what their potential role could be in future societies, and so he wrote a story that reflected that love. The original story, however, bore little resemblance to the final product, as his story heavily focused on the M5 computer, and Dr. Richard Daystrom was barely in the story at all. It was the great DC Dorothy Fontana who took this original concept, heavily rewrote it, and turned it into the masterpiece we got here. She decided what the story really lacked was a heart, and in order to insert that heart into the episode, she rewrote the story to be about Captain Kirk's fear of being replaced by a machine, a fear that many people in the 1960s had as technology was being developed at warp speed, and automation was a real fear among the public. Then, to add the cherry on the top, Fontana would also bring Daystrom to the forefront of this episode, focusing on his fears of being already seen as an irrelevant person, having had a great accomplishment in his life and trying to recapture that past glory. And together, these two plot elements served the episode well. A little bit of Trek trivia for you all here is that this episode's story was bought from Wolfe by producer John Meredith Lucas for one reason and one reason alone, because it could be made very cheaply as it was a bottle show, meaning the entire episode could be filmed on the existing Enterprise sets. And to save even more money, Lucas would decide to direct this episode himself. John Meredith Lucas was a director, a writer, and a producer. He produced the second season of Star Trek the Original Series from the episode Journey to Babel to the Omega Glory. Lucas replaced Gene L. Kuhn, who had left the show mid-season 2. Lucas would write the episodes The Changeling, Patterns of Force, and Elan of Troyes, as well as the teleplay for That Which Survives. Lucas was not rehired to continue as a producer for Season 3 of TOS, and instead would be replaced by Fred Freiberger. Lucas died of leukemia on October 19, 2002. William Marshall would lend his acting talents to this episode as the great Dr. Richard Daystrom. Marshall had an extensive acting career, even being the king of cartoons in Pee-wee's Playhouse, and I think he did an amazing job with the Richard Daystrom role. From the very beginning of the episode, there is just something slightly off about Daystrom that I feel makes the audience slightly uncomfortable about the Good Doctor. And as the episode continues, you can actually see Marshall's character sliding deeper and deeper into insanity until he finally breaks. Barry Russo would return to Trek as Commodore Bob Wesley. Russo had previously played Commander Giotto in the Season 1 episode The Devil in the Dark. More Trek trivia for you all is that the character of Bob Wesley would be brought back to Star Trek in the animated series, this time as the governor of the planet Mantilles. In the episode, One of Our Planets is Missing. However, in that episode, the character would be voiced by James Doohan, rather than having Russo return to the role due to the limited budget on the animated series. James Doohan would also actually provide the voice for both the M5 computer in this episode, as well as the voice of Commodore Enright, who served as the commanding officer of Starbase 6. In the original draft of the script, Enright was to beam aboard the Enterprise with Wesley, but in order to save money again, this second person was cut from the script, and his lines were then given to Russo to perform. George Dunning's musical score he had created for the episode Metamorphosis would be reused in this episode for the scene where Kirk romanticizes about sailing on a tall ship. And like Metamorphosis, this music fits in perfectly. And Sol Kaplan's suspenseful countdown music, written for the episode The Doomsday Machine, would also be reused in this episode, again to great effect. For the scenes which involved Commodore Wesley being in command of the USS Lexington, the prop department would reuse the high-back command chair, first seen as the ISS Enterprise's command chair from the episode Mirror Mirror. And Captain James T. Kirk would recite the poem Sea Fever by John Masefield, which would show up once again in the movie Star Trek V: The Final Frontier. And on a little side note, something interesting about this episode is that Spock harasses McCoy in this episode by stating how there is nothing in the 23rd century computer technology to replace a starship's medical officer. However, by the late 24th century, there is the emergency medical hologram as featured in Star Trek Voyager. For the remastered version of this episode, many of the shots were simply replaced. For example, in the original version, stock footage of Deep Space Station K7 was used to represent Starbase 6. However, in the remastered version, this was replaced by a CGI starbase which resembles Starbase 47 from the Star Trek novel series Vanguard. The Woden, which originally was reused footage of the SS Botany Bay from the Season 1 episode Space Seed, was redesigned as an Antares-type starship similar to that seen on the animated series. While the crippled USS Excalibur, which had been reused footage of the USS Constellation from the episode The Doomsday Machine, and all the space battles themselves were all redesigned with new computer-generated images. The Ultimate Computer as an episode of the original series would be a shining example, again, of how Star Trek could explore various issues affecting humanity within the confines of science fiction. Not only that, but it could also explore those issues in an exciting and dramatic way that could make its audience think, pondering the bigger questions that this episode actually presents. And although personally, I don't believe this episode to be the best of Season 2, it is certainly understandable why some in fandoms do consider it to be so. It is an excellent outing into the Star Trek universe, and this episode has certainly earned its place in Star Trek history.
Captain's log, stardate 4731.3. The M5 Multitronic unit has taken over total control of the Enterprise.
I can't run a starship with 20 crewmen.
The M5 can.
That thing murdered one of my crewmen, and now you tell me you can't turn it off?
Sir, sensors are picking up 4 Federation starships.
Bases firing.
Hit on the Lexington.
We're firing again, sir.
The Excalibur, a direct hit.
The Hood and Potemkin are moving off.
There's this firing, Captain.
Lexington, hit again.
There's your murder charge. Deliberate, calculated. That thing is killing men and women. 4 starships, 1,600 men and women.
It misunderstood.
I believe the only way to stop the Enterprise is to destroy her. Request permission to proceed.
Thank you for watching today's episode of Backtrack. What do you think of the episode The Ultimate Computer? Do you think this episode still holds up well today? Well, leave your comments in the section below. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, hitting that little bell icon so you won't miss a single video we release. Want to help the channel not be classified as Captain Dunsel? Then consider becoming a channel patron. The link to our Patreon account is in the description below. Thanks again for watching. Live long and prosper. Personally, I love this episode. I think it's an excellent mix of both intelligence and adventure, but it does have a few problems. First, is Starfleet really likely to name an institution on Earth after Dr. Richard Daystrom? I mean, sure, before this episode, we're told that Daystrom made the Duotronics breakthrough. So up to that point, naming something after him kinda makes sense. But then Daystrom creates a computer that goes nuts based on his own mind and kills over 400 loyal Starfleet officers. Not only that, but he has a huge mental maniacal breakdown over the whole thing. Does it really make sense that the Daystrom Institute would keep the name of such a man? So it's not really a mistake, I guess, but more food for thought. Second, does it really make sense for Starfleet to have M5 operate a Constitution-class starship for its first testing? Wouldn't it have been far more logical to have it operate, say, a freighter or some other less important class first? And finally, watch the doors to sickbay at the end of this episode. For some reason, when they open, they don't make the usual swoosh noise. Perhaps they knew Kirk was talking and didn't want to interrupt him?
I knew Bob Wesley. I gambled on his humanity.